mist is hanging low. Boots crunch the frost where the grasses grow. Rifle slung in a heart that's steady. Oh, the wild calls out and I'm already ready. The hunt is on and the woods don't lie. Tracks in the dirt under an open sky. It's a man, a plan, and the earth in sync. The hunt is on, take a breath, don't blink.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Inside Spread Podcast. My name is Kenny. I'm here with Travis again today. Thanks for joining me, Travis.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
All right, so Travis is been working on his shed hunting. He's become quite an expert in that area, and shed hunting season is just coming upon us right now. So we wanted to kind of talk about this topic today to kind of get your mind thinking about some tricks and tactics and tips to get you to find some more sheds. So Travis, could you maybe just take us through maybe like a couple keys on how to find sheds?
Sure, and I'm not sure I'm an expert. I've probably found about somewhere around 60 to 70 of them in the past like 15 years, which is not very good for some of the western states, I know, but for Michigan, it's pretty darn good. So there are a lot of things that I've learned over the years where it's just mostly by trial and error. So I've figured out, what are the best weather conditions to go, what's the best way to search, and what are some of the better tactics to use. And I would say the number one biggest thing, the biggest mistake that I think a lot of people make, is they're not going on the right weather days. And I know that sounds weird, like what
What does
difference
weather
does
have to do with it?
yeah, what does weather have to do with going out into the woods and finding an antler? And it is a make or break difference, believe it or not. Um, because like my first like several years of shed hunting, I would wait for a warm spring day, bright, sunny, and I'd go out and I'd search and I'd find nothing. And it happened over and over and over again. And eventually, after a while, I realized that when you've got sunlight beating down on the ground, especially on light colored grass, it kind of creates a snowblind effect. Like it
Makes it
overwhelms
hard for
like
people to see.
yeah, it just overwhelms the sensors in your eyes, and you have a hard time discerning an antler from leaf litter, um, or grass. There's a million
Branch.
things
Yeah.
that look like antlers.
Yeah.
And so it makes a huge difference when that sun's coming down. And the other factor in there is when you have sunlight, it's creating a lot of harsh shadows. And these harsh shadows, they just make it so hard to pick out the antlers from everything else that's out there.
Yeah, for sure. And
So
they're not laying everywhere. So like you're trying to pinpoint small areas to look in
yeah,
versus, they're not just laying around everywhere.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so my success rate started going up when I started going out on cloudy, overcast days, or even better, rainy days. Uh, just because one, it cuts down on all the contrast, it cuts down on the glare, it cuts down on the shadows. Um, the other part of it, when it's raining, the rain kind of mats down all the vegetation. And so when you've
Mhm.
got a big antler just sitting there on the ground, it just pops out a lot better
Mhm.
uh, than it would, on a regular day when the grass is up. It's amazing how big of a difference that makes. Um, the other
That's
thing that I've noticed over the years is that when an antler is wet on the ground, it's got just the little bit of sheen to it. And if you can train your eyes to look for that sheen, like you're gonna find a lot more. It's kind of amazing how big of a difference that makes. Just going out on the right days. Really, really good time if your area gets a lot of snow. If you can get out there on like the first few days when the snow is melting off and everything
Mhm.
is all the vegetation, all the leaves, everything is flat. Like that is just it's a perfect time to go.
Prime
Um,
time.
yes, absolutely. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people take that into account when they're going to look for sheds. But if you start like talking to like big time shed people, like this is stuff they've known for years, and you
Yeah.
know, people just don't talk about it. People are either in one boat, they're either a natural who goes out and finds them, no matter what, or they're like me and they struggle for years until they figure out the winning formula on it.
Hmm.
So that's like the absolute biggest thing. I mean, I have gone out when I'm just really itching to go find antlers in the sunlight, and I have found them in sunlight before. And a lot of the time I'll be out there on a sunny day, and I'm just like, this sucks. This
Yeah.
sucks because I can't I can't see anything because I know what the difference it makes. It's a lot less eye strain, especially when you're looking for something small.
Yeah.
Um, which that kind of comes to my next point is you want to look really, really small. I mean, obviously everybody wants to find, the big antler laying out, especially the big buck that you've been or that you that got away from you during the season.
Yeah.
Um, but the thing of it is that I've found that I have much less success when I'm looking for a specific antler like that. Um,
Hmm.
I always tell people look for just a tiny amount of antler, maybe
Yeah.
3 inches at a time. Uh, and especially if you can like learn to look for like the distinctive curve of like a main beam,
Hmm.
like that is way more valuable than trying to find, a giant antler. And if you start finding little antlers, if you start finding little bones in the woods, you're on the right track. And
Yeah.
eventually those big ones will show up. So those are like my
As,
two like absolute biggest tips right there.
yeah.
Look for just part of the antler and look on the right days.
Yeah. As far as the location is concerned, like, are you trying to get close to certain areas where bucks are living, or is it just kind of random, see some deer and you're like, well, maybe I'll go check over there, or is it more specific than that?
Generally, I probably find, I would say probably close to 85% of my antlers in or close to food plots. Um, I find I found a decent number in bedding areas. Um, that's another good thing. When the snow is melting, if you can get into a bedding area and see the individual beds, that helps a lot. I've
Hmm.
found a few laying, on top of the snow as it's melting off. Um, but like bedding and feeding areas are huge, especially if you get a lot of snow, like Michigan does. Like this year, we're getting dumped on by snow, and so I'm going to be hitting those food plots extra hard
Yeah.
because those bucks are going to be spending a lot of time in those food plots. Generally, I start with the food plot, you know, and then I might work into the woods around it, kind of, where they stage on the
Hmm.
edges of the woods. That's good. I don't walk a lot of random trails in the woods.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing a lot of people do. They just kind of walk through the woods at random and they don't really focus it on any one particular area. If you're going to do that, if you're going to follow the trails, I would follow the trails from the bedding area to the food plot and back. Uh, Generally, I don't start walking the woods randomly unless like I've exhausted all other areas and I'm still looking for a match. I mean,
Yeah.
you can find them there. Sometimes it is weird. Like they'll just pop up in weird spots. Um,
Hmm.
like a big thing a lot of people say is like they're not going to be in the same areas that you hunted them in. And I'd say that in some cases, yes, that's going to be true, but not always.
Yeah.
I found a matched set a few years ago. It was laying literally in front of one of my ladder stands. It was in the water, and there was only about that much antler sticking out of the water, to the point where I saw one side, and I pulled the side out of the water, and then I realized the other side was laying 5 feet away. Like it was that close to me, and
Yeah.
I did not see it. Um, but yeah, I don't know what that buck was doing there, but sometimes they will be in random spots. I will say anywhere around water too seems to be good.
Yeah.
Um, I've found quite a few antlers either in or near water. Um, I found a matched set in July one time. I think it's sitting up there. It was like a matched 7 point set. We were just kayaking down the river and I spotted an antler on the riverbank and I paddled over there and the match was in the water right next to it.
It's
This
cool.
massive 3.5-year-old 7 point set. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
those are good looking. If you've got a river or a lake somewhere nearby, definitely go check those out. Um, this one right here, this chewed up one. I
Yeah.
found this one in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, just inside the woods off Lake Michigan, believe it or not.
That's
Um,
cool.
that was in August too. Uh, that's another point I always make to people, like, don't ever stop looking for them.
Yeah.
Because the thought is that a lot of them get eaten up. And yes, that's true in some areas more than others. But there's also quite a few that survive through the season, and sometimes they're just sitting out there for years waiting to be found.
Yeah.
Um, I found one uh, while checking trail cameras in July before. So
Mhm.
I just totally missed it when I was out there looking during the season and out there checking a camera. I looked down and there's a little antler laying there. I'm like, oh, okay. So
Yeah,
you just never know where you're gonna find them.
yeah, for sure. There is obviously a seasonal approach to this because deer lose their antlers at a certain time of year. What is it typically like in Michigan as far as when they lose their antlers?
So the majority of my antler finds have been in February. Um, I find some in March and some in April. If I search that long, it really depends on how much success I'm having. If I'm finding a lot of antlers, it tends to motivate me to walk longer.
Yeah,
I only have one find in January, believe it or not. But I do know there's quite a few people who find them in January are finding them right about now. I've just never had a lot of luck doing that. Um, again, it depends on part of the country you're in. In some parts of the country, they start shedding in December, mid-December.
hmm,
Um, you know, the best thing advice I could give is you have to put some trail cameras out there and you have to monitor them. And, when you start seeing one antler deer, that means that there's antlers on the ground to find.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the food plot thing. You know, during this time, the time of year when they would drop their antlers would also be the time where they need the most food. So it's kind of like that pairing of them needing more food to recover from the rut and just from it being so cold outside that of course they would probably hang around the food and the water. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you got to factor in also that these bucks are worn down. They've been chasing does through all of November. They probably weren't eating very much during then. And so they're trying to catch back up, trying to put on some weight, especially when that snow gets really bad. You know, really heavy snows like this year, like this is like a shed hunter's best friend because it's going to concentrate those antlers in a smaller area than it would before.
Hmm.
Um, and when we've had like really bad winters where there's been almost no snow, then it becomes so hard to find antlers because those bucks will just keep wandering around and they'll go a little bit farther to find food than they probably would uh, if they're locked down by the snow.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a huge difference. And so hopefully that means it's a good start to the season coming up for you.
I'm hoping so. Like we've just had so much snow here, it's ridiculous. This is the first real winter we've had in a long time in Michigan. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this sucks, but those food plots are going to be dynamite this year. They should be at least. We did have EHD go through here, so I'm hoping I don't find a lot of deadheads this year.
Well, obviously it'll be good to hear about your adventures this spring and see what you find, and hopefully we can talk again in a couple months and say, hey, look at ones I found this year.
Yeah, I do have
Yeah.
some other tips I want to talk about.
Oh, for sure. Go ahead and
Uh,
cover those as well.
yeah. So the other thing, the other really big thing that I think a lot of people do is they walk too fast. Um, you get out there and you want to cover as much ground as possible, burn the boot leather, as many areas as possible. And I have found that if you concentrate in one area and you just slow down and you take a couple hours to go over one food plot, go over it in a grid pattern, go one direction, and then go over it another direction, go over the same spots you already walked, you'd be surprised how many
Yeah.
antlers you miss. Um, there's been a few times where uh, I've walked it in one direction and I come back the other way, and it's like, huh, there's an antler laying right there that I walked right past on the first pass. And, it might have been the sun shining in a certain way, the shadows, or maybe the grass was laying in a certain way. And once you get another angle on it, it's amazing how they pop out like that. And I read about that, and I don't think I ever really believed it until I went out there and I saw it work in practice. It's like this really does work.
Yeah. It
The
almost
rule
seems
of
like
thumb,
it almost
yeah,
seems like
the
you're.
rule,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
the rule of thumb I was going to tell people is if you think you're walking too slow, you're probably not walking slowly enough. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking like that just reminds me of like blood trailing a deer. Like, hey, you're following a deer has maybe a low blood trail, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's gone. So then you start, really looking closely, trying to grid search it, go back and forth, take your time, and that seems like kind of the similar way you would handle the shed.
oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, it's exactly the same principle. I mean, you just after a while you just have to go over it inch by inch, and depending on your hunting area, that may or may not be realistic. You do need to burn a lot of boot leather, in order to be consistently successful. But I do recommend, for someone, especially for someone looking for their first shed, just hyper focus on those food plots and those bedding areas at first, and really grid them and really go over them. Because you'd be surprised at how many go missing. Or you just walk past like this one. This one lays, practically flat on the ground when you put it
Yeah,
there, and you can walk right over that and not notice it.
for
Um,
sure.
I found sheds off of two different deer within 10 feet of each other before. You
Yeah.
know, it's it's amazing, every once in a while you'll come to an area and there'll be a whole bunch of them laying pretty close. Um, it's it's uh it's definitely challenging, but that's another just really big tip. Just slow down your search and look small.
Yeah. Uh, this may be a question you may not be prepared for, but how do you think that doing this type of shed hunting can help you understand how deer move?
Well, it's just going to give you some clues, you know, on deer that you may not have even known were out there. I found sheds before on from bucks that I had no clue were in the area, or maybe my uncle's neighbor had a photo of a buck, and all of a sudden I find a shed, and we had no idea that this buck was frequenting this area at all. you
Hmm.
know so it kind of like opens your eyes that there may be more deer around here than just what's on the trail camera.
Yeah.
um Sometimes some of these bucks, they're going to evade your trail cameras as much as you think you have the area uh covered. You'd be surprised to see what you might find sometimes out there. um I've found a few dead bucks in the area that never had on camera before. Um, and it's just kind of surprising, how good they are at evading us, and it just kind of really opens your eyes as to, there's more deer in the area than you think, and
Yeah.
they might not be using the areas that you think they're using. I have found an occasional oddball shed in the area where, you sit there and try and think, well, what was he doing here? And
Yeah.
why was he here? And if you start, looking at satellite images and thinking about the terrain and stuff like that, you can kind of start to reverse engineer it and figure out, okay, he probably came from this direction. Maybe he was headed to this food plot over here, you know, and sometimes you might find, a trail or a funnel, some hidden feature of the terrain that's moving deer in a way that you might not expect.
That's for sure. It's always interested me because people who run trail cams, and I have run them in the past too. Is like you're you have a very limited perspective of what you're seeing, and you might be seeing great deer activity, no doubt, but that basically that eyelid that you're looking through out in there is only covering so much ground, and you would have to have hundreds and hundreds of cameras on just one little section of ground just to cover all of it to see all the activity that's actually going on in your area. But it does give us a nice glimpse. It's just not the full picture of what's happening around you.
You would basically have to have like those 360 cameras. You'd have to have them like evenly spaced apart to cover every single inch of, property or in order to know everything that's going on out there.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes bucks take really weird paths. There's been many times where I found a shed and it's just like, okay, that's not the path I would have expected him to take, but he's in the same general ballpark, but it's like, oh, he walked behind my trail camera instead of
Mhm.
in front of it. Had that happen a few times. Um, one thing I have noticed over the years, it's like there is a little bit of consistency in where I find some of these sheds. Like there are a few spots I check year in and year out, and I always find them in these specific areas. And I don't know entirely why that is, if it's just coincidence or if those bucks are spending more times in those areas than I thought they were. Um, but it's really interesting because I can like go to one spot and I can point to like 4 or 5 antlers in my collection that were found within, you know, 15, 20 feet of each other in the same little section, cutting across a field.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, they must obviously they spend a lot of time there for that to happen because they I'm sure that's not like on a very time schedule when those antlers fall off. Obviously, in general, it's December, January, February time frame, but there's no telling what day it's going to actually be, and they just happen to be standing in that spot, so there's got to be a reason why they're there.
Yeah, and I've found antlers, that's another thing. Go back over spots again, even if you've gone over them once, because that's happened to me a few times in the past where, a month later I go past back over the same spot and oh, there's an antler that wasn't there before.
Hmm.
I think some people they hit their spots once and then they don't go back and then they end up missing, antlers that fell in the meantime. I once got a photo of a buck here in Michigan that was holding its antlers in April still. So it's kind of all over the map. You know, some of them are going to hold a little bit longer than others.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have done some shed hunting, not mostly not intentional. Found some sheds on my own, but I love to take my kids out this spring and find a couple good days that which are bad weather days. It seems like because they cloudy, maybe rainy would be the best way to go and go out into the national forest around here and see if I can see what we can find out there. Or there's some WMAs and some state land as well. So be interesting to go just check it out and start figuring out where the deer are. It's just I think it's like another data point in our brains to be like, oh, there's deer activity here during this time of year. Hopefully that can you start investigating and over hopefully a year, you kind of figure out where the deer are, where they're going and what they're doing. And that's eventually how you get a good shot.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like I said, it can clue you in on bucks that you didn't even know were around. So that's been a big thing for me. It's like every few years I'll find like a single antler or a set. I'm like, what is this buck and where did it come from? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if it's just a winter wanderer or, it's just another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, if you have good food plots nearby or just food in general for them to eat in the middle of the winter, I'm sure there's going to be deer that come from a long ways away just to make sure that they're getting the nutrition that they need. So, and they have 24 hours a day to do it, where, we're like looking at, oh, what's happening during the daytime versus the nighttime. And they're just like out there roaming around for, obviously they sleep too a lot, but they're roaming around pretty much for 24 hours looking for their next meal.
yeah, for sure. Another tip I would give is if you can hold off a little bit on walking, if you're hunting like public areas, like you're probably going to want to get out there sooner than later just to beat the competition out there. But if you've got like a
Mhm.
public area or a private area where, you're the only one who has access, it might be worth waiting, a little bit later than you would on public land. And that's just so those bucks can go out there and they don't feel a lot of pressure, and they feel comfortable there. And then it's more likely that, maybe that target buck that got away during the season is going to drop his antlers, somewhere that's very easy to find, as opposed to you go in there and you push him out and he goes over to the neighbors and he drops on the neighbors and then you never find him.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that's kind of helped me over the years is I try to wait till mid-February, usually here in Michigan. Um,
Yeah.
It really depends. If we have like a lot of snow and stuff, I'm more apt to want to get out there a little bit sooner because I feel like that pressure to survive kind of forces them to drop a little bit earlier. But
Yeah.
if you can, if you can wait a little bit, it's definitely worth it. The flip side of that is that then you're dealing with spring green up coming up because once the vegetation starts coming up, then it starts getting really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking about that. Like the area that I hunted this year, I probably won't be able to get there again until March, maybe. But still gonna go there and just give it a look and see what I can find. You never know. There's a couple bucks in there that would be interesting sheds to find. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna try to do that this spring. Because I've now hunted that deer for a couple of years. It'd be cool to check it out.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to think outside the box too. Like we were talking before we started recording. I mean, this antler right here, this is my biggest shed ever. It's just over 64 inches and just great mass on him. Um, and that antler I actually found in an urban area behind a movie theater. And
Hmm.
as I said, there was a heavy hiking trail right here. There was a busy road right there. There was businesses over here. And this buck was just wandering around this urban area because, he knows he can't be touched there.
Yeah,
Uh, so, if you don't want to hit like your major hunting spots right away, but you're still feeling that itch, go and check out your city parks, check out, the bike trails, um, check out cemeteries. If you've got like a big wooded cemetery that's got like a lot of like hollers and valleys in it, places where bucks can get out of the wind. Uh,
yeah,
I found antlers in places like that before. It's kind of funny where you can find them once you start uh really pinning down how deer are acting and uh, how they're thinking. If you're in like the city and you see some deer, in the city, take note of that and come
yeah,
back later to the area and have a look around. You never know.
yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of urban deer that we probably don't ever even see, even though they live in our neighborhood per se, and we just kind of ignore it like it doesn't exist. But there could be opportunity to find some sheds and some cool things just by looking around your neighborhood potentially.
There have been some absolute monsters in recent years. I was reading about one that got poached in like a cemetery where I think it was in like Tennessee or something. There was one living in a cemetery, and the dude tried to pass it off as a legitimate kill, except for the local photographers had the bead on this buck, and they'd been shooting photos of it for like 3 years, and so that guy got majorly busted. That's the only thing about like if there's like a big urban buck, like someone probably knows about it, and there
Yeah,
might be other people looking for it, but you know, not a lot of shed hunters, going into those urban areas and having a look around. I mean, you if you can't hunt them for real, you might as well go and look for, the big
yeah,
sheds. So
yeah. That's for sure. It's a little bit of a consolation, to hey, you can't hunt that deer, but he's on the neighbor's property. Maybe the neighbor will at least let me go look for its antlers.
yeah,
That could be a way to meet a neighbor anyways and get to know them.
yeah. I never did find the match to that big shed I found behind that movie theater, but it's like I wonder if it's in somebody's house up there because there were so many houses a little bit farther down the trail. I bet you someone was out for a jog one morning and picked that up. It's probably a dog's chew toy right now or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. So that's something to talk about because, like you said, you found them from basically from February to August. What are some of the causes of why they disappear off the landscape besides people picking them up?
Well, a lot of it is just, critters eating them up, and it really depends on the area. Sometimes they find them and sometimes they don't. Like that 7 point set I found on the river, like they were not chewed up at all.
Hmm.
Um, but and I'm pretty sure they were out there for at least a year before I found them. Maybe a little bit longer. Depends on in my area they tend to get a little bit bleached, but they'll also get kind of stained in color too.
Hmm.
Sometimes I just don't think the rodents find them. It really depends on where you're up. I think if you've got like porcupines and stuff like that in the area, like then it becomes a lot harder to find them because they like to eat them up. Um, but yeah, it really varies. I think out west, like they have more antlers that just kind of disintegrate over time. You
Hmm.
know, they get dried and they get cracked. I've seen pictures of them online where it's just like there's some guys that don't even pick those up. They call them chalk because they're so far gone. You know, there's just no value to picking them up at all at that point. And
It's
I think
so
it's just
so dry
because
there
they
most of
don't.
the year, besides the snow, that they just turn into sand basically.
Yeah, yeah. It's just that they have so many rodents out there, and you know, especially out west, where you know, like they're looking for like elk and mule deer and moose and everything all in one area, and like over there, like the fresh brown ones, those are the ones the guys want, and some of them will just they're like, I don't care, it's a chalk. You know, I've
Yep.
seen that before. Which in Michigan, I'm bringing the chalks home
Yep.
because we're not picky here.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, we're lucky you
it
find them at
really,
all.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. My best year is 11, and I've done that twice. Um, so, but there's a lot of people here in Michigan who I talk to. They're like, I've never found one, or I've found one while I was turkey hunting by accident. Like you said, there's a lot of people who have only found them like that. Um, it does
Yeah.
take some effort and it does take some dedication, but it is worth it when you find those big ones, man. It's just so rewarding.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to cover before we bid you adieu for the day?
Nothing more than I can think of. I mean, that's pretty much all of my tips on finding them. At least that's what's worked for me here in Michigan.
Sounds good.
Unfortunately, I haven't had many opportunities outside of Michigan to go and really shed hunt, or if I did, it was well after prime time, so your odds are a little bit reduced. But you know, one of these days I want to go kind of out west and I want to look for some mule deer and elk sheds.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I do have a few of those, and it was, again, it was by happenstance that I found them, but it was still a cool experience to be able to find something that big out in the woods. And so, yeah, I look forward to trying to take my kids out in the woods this spring and see if we can scrounge up a few things and see if we can get a couple of sheds for their closets, or their mantles and things to hang on to. So, alrighty, well, thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate it, giving your insight and tips and tricks. And yeah, get out there and shed hunt. It can help you learn a little bit more about the landscape that you're doing. And yeah, get out there because it's also fun just to be out in the woods. So hope you all have a great day, and thanks for joining the Inside Spread. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Where the air smells sweet, echoes of the woods, where the heart beats meet. Freedom runs wild under nature's dome, down by the pine. It feels like home. Crisp wind whispers through the autumn gold, stories of the land, both new and old. Tracks in the dirt, the trail calls my name. Out here in the wild, it's all just the same. Down by the pine,